Okay, wonderful. So my name is Jess Ewart, and my partner here is Erica Simon. And we are both with a nonprofit organization called Lead with Love. If you're a part of the Aspen Valley or spent some time here, you may have heard of it. We used to be called Aspen City of Wellbeing a few years ago, and we're really well known for kind of convening a big leadership summit in Aspen every single year in the fall in the off season. And we had some great thought leaders and speakers that used to come to that. And obviously with COVID, we made pivots just like 100% of the rest of the world. And one of the programs that really arose up for Lead with Love over the summer was Love in Action. And we'll kind of go through and I'll get us into our centering and meditation. I just want to give you a little background on the program. It was really the brainchild of my friend Erica here and Gina Murdoch. And it was really in response to, partly the pandemic, being confined, being at home and locked down, but also truly all of the social justice issues that we saw arising over the summer. And a sense that as a community of conscious people that have done a lot of work on themselves, seeing that there are these injustices, there are these issues, what could we do to rally that community of really conscious, amazing humans and get them to take all of these tools that they've been honing for themselves and put it to use for the greater good? And that was the impetus for it. And I'm going to hand it over to Erica in just a minute to expound on that, if you don't mind, Erica, for just another moment.
I don't mind. Hi. So we realized, just like Jess said, that we felt like we needed to get involved with a lot of the activation that was happening around social issues and beyond, even more than social issues. It also happened to be an election year. There was a lot compiling that was an opportunity for our attention. And we also were noticing this sense of people wanting to be involved, but not knowing how to get involved. And one thing that was coming up for us as like people stuck at home in this day and age was we were getting a lot of prompts, let's say on like Instagram or Facebook to make calls to your representatives or things like that. And we were noticing that like when we were using these platforms, we were kind of more in a like passive, relaxed state. Like it wasn't our most engaged moments. So we were like, okay, what if we can gather people, virtually and have them take action together, and it would feel supported and empowering and connected. And that was a big part of it for us, was like facilitating connection among our community, because that was another issue that was a problem at the time, especially still is, obviously. And we knew that there was a lot of really professional like nonprofits and organizations out there that were doing this work already at a really like high level. And we wanted to occupy a space where we were kind of an entry for people to come in. So people who hadn't really thought of themselves as activists, but were ready to engage, but don't know how. That was kind of our target. And so we wanted to do it with a lot of compassion, diplomacy, a really gentle, loving approach into the values that they cared about. And so we just jumped in and we started doing it.
And
yeah,
that's a beautiful, just assessment of what we did. And so one of the things being Lead with Love, our organization innately has a very big wellness, personal development component to it. So as we're gathering people to work on these really big issues, sometimes very heavy issues, and, honestly, sometimes overwhelming issues, one of the ways we want them to feel supported is to bring the wellness component in. So that's what we're going to do together right now before we jump further into the rabbit hole and into this intellectual kind of space, is to, wherever you are sitting, just go ahead and see if you can find your feet on the floor. If you can just find both feet touching the earth, you can have shoes on, be barefoot. You're at home, who knows? You might not have pants on. I'm not sure. I don't need to know. But we definitely want both feet on the ground. And we want to feel like the sitting bones, those two bony protrusions that you can feel beneath you, that they're really rooted in. So it might be into your couch cushion, it might be into a chair, but just starting to feel that and naturally allowing your eyes to close. And this is just going to start to tune out all of those visual distractions. And as you feel your 2 feet on the ground, really acknowledging that connection to the earth, that I love to think about this in meditation, just picturing from a zoomed out view how absolutely small we are, each of us little humans, but we're all connected to the earth, through this amazing force of gravity. And it's just holding us all on this planet. And from that perspective, it's becomes easier to see the interconnectedness of each and every person. And so feeling ground in, start to sort of sit a little taller in your spine, like you're just stacking the bones of your back. And with your eyes closed, breathe in through your nose and feel your shoulders rise up towards your earlobes. And as you open your mouth to breathe out, just let it sigh and let your shoulders fall. So on your next inhale, just circle your shoulders up towards your ears. Breathe in through the nose. Breathe out of your mouth. And drop your shoulders down. We'll do that 3 more times together. Inhale. And exhale. Deep, full breath in. Slow sigh out. Just 1 more big breath in through your nose. Out of your mouth. And allow your shoulders to stay sliding down away from your earlobes. Seal your lips, but keep some space between your teeth so your jaw is very soft. Your eyes are closed so softly, you might even see light coming in through the lid creases. And just imagine the most placid expression ever across your face. Absolute and utter peace and calm. Your breath is moving easily in and out of your nose. And for a moment, just shift your awareness maybe to your right pinky finger, just to the very tip of your finger. You're not moving it, you're not shifting it, you're just moving the awareness. And then you can move your attention maybe to the left shoulder blade, your right kneecap, even your left big toe. And as you begin to notice your ability to move your awareness and your attention around within your own body, now bring it right to the space behind your navel and begin to picture your awareness like a little ball of light and just watch it grow bigger. You're just expanding your awareness so that it fills your entire abdomen, your chest cavity. It's starting to move down into the tops and backs of your legs. It's moving up, filling the lungs, the heart, the shoulders, the upper arms, forearms, and hands, all the way down your shins and calves into your feet, the soles of your feet, the tips of your toes. You're just picturing this awareness starting to occupy your throat, your jaw, your skull, almost like you could see your whole body, the form itself in the shape of a beam of light. And just noticing when you use your concentration, how you can expand your awareness. You can shift it anywhere you want. And then just retracting that, pulling it back. You're just watching this kind of light-filled form shrink all the way back down into almost just a little pinpoint of light right behind your navel. And choosing now for the next little while that we have together to allow your mind and your awareness to focus on our conversation, on the ideas that we'll exchange together, on the very human problems, big and small, that we would like to solve together. And just holding that intention, start to blink your eyes open until you find yourself back in your room, back in your seat, and ready to begin. So hopefully that makes you feel relaxed. Whenever I do those breathing exercises, it's usually the first time of the day I realize I haven't actually taken a deep breath the entire day. So it's helpful. It's a good reminder. So to get started today, now that you know the background of Love in Action and what it is and what we do, I'd love to learn a little bit more about all of you. And so the chat is open, and you can use a few words, you could write a sentence, but maybe let Erica and I know, in what realm of the world do you operate? And, do you run an organization? Are you a full-time parent? Are you a volunteer? But, if it's a job title, that's great, but just, kind of where you're working in this world. I'll put mine in there too, because I have a few jobs, but. I love that, Andrea. That's a really beautiful description. And it sounds so purpose-driven to wake up every day to support others in developing their human capacity. It's amazing.
I also add that it's all part of supporting. It's like it's almost like of a pyramid, the base of a pyramid. It's like you need the people, right, that make up the community or the organization or the group or whatever. So it's like we all bring those, ourselves, right, to the table.
Absolutely. And I love what Dave says. My favorite part of this day, I'm just going to read it for the record since we're taping this. I am a coach helping leaders develop and use their intuition to practical and tangible outcomes. And I have a lot of history as a communications director and activism. Dave, what I love is the specificity of this. Getting people to access their intuition is so helpful on this planet. I think most people, are sort of wired, at least culturally, not to even trust that part of themselves. So that you are intentionally going after activating that, and then tangible outcomes. I love that too. As someone who has worked with a lot of visionaries, Erica and I were having a conversation yesterday. She shared a New York, was it a New Yorker cartoon, Erica? It was a fireman standing in front of a fire. What did he say? Remind me what he said. It was a good punchline.
It's like a couple firefighters in front of like an erupting fire, and one of them's kind of holding his hose. He's like, I'm more of an idea firefighter.
So for those of us that have worked with ideas people, Dave, practical and tangible outcomes are something that a lot of us are trying to get at when we're working in that realm. So we'd love that. And Mary says, I try to make admin work easy for people. Bless you, Mary, for taking that on in this world. I've already had 2 meetings before this one, and both times administrative work came up, and both of the people on the call, they're like, I can't do it. They're like, I'm terrible at it. That was what they said, is these are people that have really high level like responsibilities, and the admin was what was chopping them off at the knees. So that's amazing that you're working on that front as well. So one of the things that I would like to ask the group next is, looking back over the past year, when we have been at home, and we've also seen a lot happening in the world, is there a particular social issue that you've seen in the news or discussed with people, maybe among your friends, that struck home for you?
I mean, that's such a loaded question for me. Jess.
You can put 6 of them in there if you want, Andrea. And then I'm going to ask you guys to speak and share and elaborate on that a little bit.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah, put in the chat just so we have a record of it. I love these chats because I depend on these for all the meetings I do to have reference points for future emails and communications. But yeah, I'd love to actually hear from you. So whoever wants to speak first and share this, that would be amazing. Oh, Mary, yes. Of the social issues that you've maybe seen or on television or in the news or heard your friends discussing in the past few months, is there a particular issue or issues that's really struck home for you? And I'm going to pick on Dave first because because I don't even have to give a reason. No, because he has a history as a communications director. So I know that he's going to be very eloquent. I'd love to hear more about this, Dave.
Okay, well, thanks for letting me jump in. We could talk about it in a lot of specific areas, but the bigger conversation is equity and inequity. And I think in that space, there's a lot of friction, not just who has what opportunities or privileges or who doesn't, but kind of in the space of, I'm not the kind of person who takes things from other people. I'm not the kind of person who takes up space or opportunities. And that's a fascinating part of it. So kind of people seeing what's going on in the inequity and how COVID's happening, or in terms of the climate crisis, or in terms of voter rights, or some of these other things, and then saying, pointing the finger, someone needs to do something about it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hard.
I think that's a very astute assessment. You know, I'd say for us, that was one of the impetus of our reasons for being, is hearing people say, someone should do something about this. We're like, maybe it's us. Maybe we need to get to work. Andrea, can you speak a little bit about this having a platform where there's less discourse over the issues?
Yeah, I think over the last handful of years, I think not just in politics, but elsewhere in our nation and even in our community, it just seems like, God, it's like, why can't people get along? You know, it's just like, why is there all this discourse? How come people can't come together and agree to disagree, you know, or be empathetic to other people's perspective, and then open up a conversation to get curious? You know, I think that's so missing in a lot of areas right now. And a lot of research I've been doing ultimately leads to lack of empathy. You know, it's like it's a lost skill. Nobody's willing to go there anymore. And it's kind of unfortunate. I'm not saying everyone, you know, but it's forgotten. Like the ego gets involved, or something happens where the empathy just goes out, you know, just in any sort of conflict or disagreement. So if we can all train ourselves better to improve that skill, to be curious and empathetic, I think we would be further along in solving these issues.
I think that really works in tandem with what Dave was saying to a degree, which is, you know, we do get into finger pointing. We do get into waiting for the hero to show up when we aren't seeing actively what our role is in the issue. And, you know, it's, you know, you don't have to be, you know, walking around intentionally oppressing people and using foul language and, you know, to be a part of a systemic issue. You know, it's simply not having an awareness of what's happening is a part of the problem. It's just, you know, the not knowing of it and not feeling perhaps motivated to learn more about the issue itself. Mary, I'm going to give you the option of either speaking here, or if you want to type in the chat, but you know, you said social issues are hardest because of feeling helpless to make a difference, to be able to improve people's situations. You know, I think you've really identified an obstacle that a lot of us feel, which is sometimes these things just seem so big. And I'm one person who's now trapped in my living room. You know, how am I supposed to move the needle? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think one of my coworkers mentioned the Myanmar situation this morning, like first thing when I got to work. And then yesterday I had heard about sorry, the cat is being really loud. And then yesterday having heard the history and the conflict and how it goes back over like 80 years and it's corrupt on all sides. Like, wow, there's nothing that I can do about that. And maybe it's just trying to like find social issues that I can make a difference with, instead of being overwhelmed with these bigger things that I truly have no idea how I can even do anything to help out.
I'd love to, I'm going to shift this to Erica here in just a moment, because what Erica does at Love in Action is, you know, the social issue of the moment. These are usually very prescient topics is identified. And then Erica has the, we'll say honor, not joy, because it's not always fun, of really diving deep into research. And so one of the first things she does is educates herself so that she can then educate our group on the history of the issue. If it's something systemic, how systemic, like how far back in time does this go? And so I'd also just, so Erica, at least as my friend that I talk to pretty often, is a happy, well-adjusted woman. So I don't think that this work has broken her entirely, but I am curious, Erica, how when you are looking at a big topic, you do drill down to a place where you feel like you can make a difference.
Yeah, not broken yet, but definitely some tears shed along the way. It's Empathy is such an interesting word that you used, because I consider myself to be a pretty like level 10 empath, and being an empath and an activist are kind of sometimes a colliding forces. You get really, it can be a very intense experience to try to take on the suffering of the world, you know, but I think it is really important. And I think if we can get out of that feeling of survival, needing to protect ourselves at all costs, the fear of, you know, loss or scarcity or something, and then come into some sense of abundance and generosity through helping other people, it can be really helpful. But okay, so into the research, you know, a lot of times I just pick a topic pretty broad, like we're hearing a lot about food bank lines. So hunger is the, you know, big topic, or we're hearing a lot about the wildfires from last fall, you know, and so I'll start real broad like that, and I'll have an idea in my head where I want to go. So for example, in the most recent toolkit we did in the most recent session, we were hearing a lot about the unemployment crisis, especially facing women. So that was the topic, and I was kind of keeping my eye on, oh, Janet Yellen had just been appointed and there's wage gap issues and she's really into that. And and so I thought I was going to go down that direction a bit. And instead, what was really, I just kind of cast a really wide net, like I said. So I'm just, okay, here's this article. I'm looking at different articles. I look a lot into reports that are coming out from the government or think tanks. And I start to like create, like look for patterns. And so the pattern that I was noticing was there's unemployment facing women, and it's basically being more or less attributed to two factors. But so one of them is the industries that were affected by COVID tend to be industries that women are most employed in. And then the other thing is childcare. Obviously, during the pandemic with the schools closed, you can imagine this being a really big issue. So I go through that, and actually, Jess, will you scroll up one more time, just because I skipped that one section. So to start, I wanted people to understand in our groups and our meetings, like, and I try to, per your point, Mary, like really let people know as much as I can about what we're going to be taking action on, so they feel confident taking the actions when we get to them, that we're making the right moves. And so we started off by just saying simply, like, what is unemployment? What does that mean even? Because people kind of maybe think of it as just being out of work, but it actually has a very specific definition that's creating a lot of the statistics that we're looking at, right? So for example, it means people who are jobless, actively seeking work, and available to take a job. That does not include anyone who's dropped out of the labor force entirely, or who has been unemployed for like over 6 months, let's say. So during this time, we're actually seeing these like masked kind of skewed numbers. 5.4 million women are out of work right now. That's a net. So 12.1 million women have lost their job. I think the population of Colorado is 5.7 million. So like you can kind of imagine what sort of impact this is having on our economy. Like it's like the entire population of Colorado being wiped out of their jobs, you know, more or less. So we just go through and we offer up a lot of statistics, infographics, graphs, trying to get people to understand the state of what's happening. I like to include little videos sometimes, because the multimedia approach seems to be like a nice way to break up the session. And then we went ahead and discussed the different industries. So healthcare, domestic workers, retail and hospitality, childcare workers. Those are the 4 areas that are most impacted. Women of color being most particularly impacted, with some data. And then really drill down, deep dive into the childcare issue. That was kind of the issue that came up the most. And I'm, you know, not a mom myself. This isn't like a personal bias I have or anything. This is really the significant topic. And what I was becoming aware of during my research is that childcare and care in general is a crisis in our country. I mean, we do a really poor job with care in our country.
And I just want to jump in for 1 minute, Erica, because I think this gets to what you're saying, Mary. When we started with a big issue, which is women's unemployment due to the pandemic, through the research path that Erica's taken, we got to something where maybe we could move the needle. So if one of the root causes is childcare, care in general, and then we learn about why we devalue it, then she was able to find solutions related to the root issue instead of like, I guess I have to build a company and hire a bunch of women. Like, I don't know, I need to open a childcare facility. Like she's getting us to a place where we're empowered to actually do something. And I'll let you continue.
Well, and that's really the most important point that Jess just made, is that every topic that we pick and the way we convey our message on that topic is always leading to actions. The main point of this is so that people feel empowered and inspired to take action. So just, as Jess is going
We'll just scroll down to some of the actions you came up with.
Well, and actually just scroll up one little bit, one more, just so they can see. So and actually one more section up.
Okay, sure.
Right there, yeah. So what we were able to make aware to ourselves was that there's some policy on the Congress floor right now. I mean, the American Rescue Plan was just passed. So for all the people that attended our call beforehand, like they can pat themselves on the back and be like, I made my calls to my senators to ask them to pass it, and now it's passed. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, can actually see some impact that they're, it's our job to tell our representatives what we want. And so we're just trying to remind people of the path to do that. And then if you scroll down, there's another piece of legislation that's going to be introduced on the floor of the House soon. It was originally, the architect built the bill back in 2019, I think, and it's being supported now again, and there's some energy coming back to it, and it has a ton of amazing provisions for childcare and for working families. So we just lay those out here and explain, like, in summary, what that bill looks like, so it's not just like this crazy jargon. And then we say, check to see if your representative has co-signed or is a co-sponsor on this act. And then we create a link for them to do so. So you just go there, you enter in your information, it'll tell you if your representative has supported this bill. If they have, you can write them and use their contact information, which is actually just beneath these two scripts, to contact either your senator or your representative. We give you a link to how to find their contact information. And then we say, if they did co-sponsor the bill, here's a script. You can use it, you cannot use it, it's up to you. But for a lot of people, they do know they want to take action. They just don't want to have to write the script out themselves. So we provide a script to people who would like to take that path. We encourage them to use their own words if they want to. And then I didn't even know this term really before, but we started working with a platform that will help us understand, like, our impact of our actions, and they were calling it a spank and thank. So, like, you thank your representative who has co-sponsored the bill, and you spank your representative who hasn't sponsored the bill that you want them to. And so we can come up with scripts for either one of those, and it's actually a known thing, like a known entity, that thanking your representative or encouraging them to support a bill are both really impactful. And actually, would you go back to that screen? Sure. I just want to say that we don't just address policy. One thing is, the next section is actually about the American Rescue Plan. So I'm going to pull that out of the toolkit because that's kind of a done deal now. I'm going to replace it with an encouragement to write a letter to working mom, like the working mom in your life. So we always try to make like a sort of personal impact, because that matters too, right? Like, we're all humans here. You can work on a policy level, or you can work human to human. We always offer up some resources. And then under sign, those are a list of other organizations that are doing this work and their petitions. So you can just simply click on those links, sign your name to them, and they'll send them off for you. So we're always trying to encourage and amplify the work of other organizations that are working on these causes. We like to support artists that are working on these causes. So we give some options for, like, ways to post about it on your social media. It also reminds your community that these are issues that are important to you. There's nothing more inspiring to creating like a ripple of change than to present yourself as someone who cares about an issue and show people that you care enough to take action on it. And then the rest of it's kind of just like more amplification of like this program at the end.
Yeah, and so essentially that's just how we do it with our toolkits. But the point is really just to show, that the research is what leads to it. It's the educational component that gets to a place where we can actually take action. And I'm going to let you answer this question, Erica, that Dave has, which is how do you define or decide upon the targets of that advocacy? Because you actually make those decisions for our org.
The issues, you mean, Dave?
Yeah, they're like, what's the topic that we choose for them? How?
We started at first saying we were going to fill like 4 categories because we knew we needed to, because we wanted to be interactive. So we wanted our audience to let us know what they're interested in, and we would actually just do all this work based on their input. But we knew it could get really out of control. And so, for example, like with the Myanmar issues, like, does that fit into what we're doing or not? And so we more or less have decided to keep it national, like federal or state level issues or cities stuff, but things that are happening in our country related to social justice, democratic participation, climate change and the environment, and child advocacy. So those are the 4 topics. But what you'll find is that really so much fits into those. I mean, they cover a huge amount. So we're actually kind of like wiggling it down a little bit more now, I think, just to make sure that we don't feel like we're jumping around too much for our audience, but we still want to be interactive. And if you guys, for example, are I know you're coaches and you work with your coworkers and the community at Roaring Fork Leadership, like if you guys have topics that you would like to see covered, we would be more than happy to work with you on new topics and new sessions.
I'm a little curious, just as a lead into that, Dave, you're doing some work coaching people that are trying to have an impact. Am I understanding that? Can you share with us some of the issues that are front and center for them?
Yes, and let me bounce back for a second, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, Erica, you're focusing on federal level stuff, representatives, kind of Congress and stuff like that, rather than other leaders. And is that because of Salsa or Phone to Action or whatever platform you're using? And
well, we want people to be able to take action from their home, right? So it's helpful for us to kind of marry like an issue and knowing that there's like legislation happening around it, because then we can really get the action combined with the topic.
Got it.
But for example, we've covered quite a few like race issues with police shootings, or not shootings, but like Elijah McClain. He was, he died after an interaction with the police. We covered Breonna Taylor. Those weren't really federal level. We were actually targeting, Louisville, Kentucky for Breonna Taylor, or Kenosha, Wisconsin for Jacob Blake. And we dealt with it. It is a little trickier because their representatives are not, they don't like need our votes. I'm in New York.
Totally.
So why does the state legislature in Kenosha care about me, but at the same time, when it's topics that are kind of in the national frenzy, it feels okay. And we believe that there's an element of let's just apply pressure to them. Let them know that pressure is coming from all across the country. Like the eyes of the country are on your city. And that does still feel good. So we feel empowering and feel like it can move the needle. So we kind of will look at the cause and either keep it national, or if it happens to be a local cause. And we've talked a little bit about doing a little more regional focus in the Roaring Fork Valley too. So that may be something that comes up for us in the future.
Awesome, thank you. And then I'll answer Jess's question. And it's, yes, that balance between, I'm not your constituent, but I'm going to tell you how I feel, is such a dance. It's such a dance. So thanks for daylighting that. So what I've experienced in talking with a lot of people is there's a lot of people who are just like, the world has happened to me in the past year, and I don't know how to navigate it. I don't know what to do. And a little bit of it is just this frenetic action of, even when the stimulus has stopped, the news has maybe slowed down, or there's a less of a burst of something happening. People are still in that fight or flight mode right now. So what I've noticed in the folks I've talked to is, it's like, okay, wait, no, slow down. What do you want to create? Where are you trying to get to? What kind of world do you want to see? Versus, yeah, I know it's COVID and all this stuff is happening. And so just I've been experiencing talking to a lot of people who feel like the world is happening to them rather than through them or because of them, and you know, how to help people make that shift a little bit for self-empowerment in the face of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I think, you know, I relate to that. I think we all feel like the world has been happening to us. And, you know, I think for us, that is the impetus. It's about empowerment. It's to say, I know you might have lost your job. Your child is now at home, as is your partner. I mean, for me, that's been a huge challenge, which is why I'm not working out of my house anymore. I actually got office space because my husband and I were both working from home. We're either going to stay married or we're both going to work from home. Like, we need to choose. And the child's at home. So this organization and this particular program really stemmed from a desire of, with what you have at hand, which is probably a computer, internet, and a pen, how can you take action, and what can you do? And so I'm curious too, Dave, with your group, have you seen a specific topic come out that there's interest in?
In my communications director
Yes.
role?
No, I think so when you're doing what is the group that you're coaching? Like, what's the premise?
It's called functional intuition. It's helping
Gotcha.
business leaders and professionals tap into their intuition so that they have access to a skill set that we all have, but many of us haven't really systematically learned how to work with.
Gotcha. Totally understand. And that's amazing. And then Mary, can I ask you what your relationship to Roaring Fork leadership is? There is one.
I have crossed paths with them a few times over the years. I think my current relationship has just kind of stemmed from wanting to be around people that are have different ideas or that are smarter than I am. Especially during COVID, just trying to connect with folks is kind of why I joined today.
I think it's such an interesting instinct that you would have in these times, that you're like, okay, I'm gonna connect with a leadership group. You know, I think everyone responded to this pandemic really differently, you know, and probably at this point, now that it's dragged on this long, has responded a few different ways, you know. But I will say personally, you know, through what we've experienced with Lead with Love and Love in Action is, I do feel like there has been a sense of wanting to be activated, of wanting to be a part of the solution, that there is something about the overwhelm of just the size of what's happening to everybody and just the way it impacts every little piece of your life, that a great number of people, and it speaks to resiliency, which I know is the theme that you're working with, Andrea, that they are resilient. And then you might get knocked back for the first few weeks, and you're doing puzzles and you're baking bread and you're doing all things that everyone's doing. But there did come a time when I think a great number of people decided to step forward, and they're like, I'm actually going to do something with this. It could be defined a lot of ways, but I'm choosing to see it as an opportunity. And so, Andrea, as someone who's running the program around resiliency, what has been your experience of people's responses and what they're called to do or not do?
It's been an ebb and flow, I think, right? Like, some days you definitely feel like that charge to take action, and then other days it's like, I need a break, right? It's like, I hear so often of, I even asked, somebody said, is there such thing as empathy fatigue? I'm like, for sure. Or decision-making fatigue, or whatever, connection fatigue, right? Or Zoom fatigue, right? Whatever, put whatever word you want in front of fatigue. But that's just the human experience. And I think there's that evolution. At some point, it's like you realize, oh, like what Dave was saying, it's like it's happening to me versus I want to be empowered and do something about it, right? I think we all have, call it that vicious cycle that occurs. But I did a research, and there's another resiliency experience on called Resiliency Victim to Empowered. And it utilizes emotional intelligence composites, different elements of your EQ, to identify the roadmap that will help you the most. And each person might be slightly different to get to that empowered place. So you know, and it's interesting on a local level. I just wanted to make a point that, you know, Dave is also, he has a coaching business he does on his own. And then he's a coach for an RFL civic project team.
Mm.
And, you know, this year it's interesting, like we have 4 organizations that literally want to create change in our community through the idea that they presented to RFL. And one of them was around, it's the organization called Mod for Quads, and it's like helping paraplegics or people that have been, you know, lost functioning in their body to have a connection, a resource. Others have went through, you know, storytelling of how did you go through this? Who's a doctor you saw? What resources did you have? And then another one is Roaring Fork High School. You know, just with the pandemic, these kids, there is a sense of disconnect. So how do we keep them connected and willing to take action in a leadership type of element? The other one is Aspen Strong, Valley Strong, tackling mental health and the stigmatism, right? Am I saying that right? Stigmatism that comes with it. And then another one is kind of this economic resiliency in our community. It's like even thinking about like skill gaps that exist of how do we make sure that we stay relevant, the human capital aspect once again. So kind of incorporate all. I do see that sometimes there's so many things we can get involved in, right? And then you get to that point, like what Mary is talking about. It's like, I don't even know where to start, but it's like, you got to start somewhere, you know, just start somewhere in whatever path you can find.
Absolutely. I think it's so wonderful that you're doing civic impact intentionally and coaching people through that process. Dave, can you share, since you are coaching individuals going through that program, what is like the number one obstacle that they sort of share with you that comes up when they're trying to move forward through this process of having an impact?
I'll say it from the first person, although this is an observation. It's something along the lines of, I'm operating on a team in an environment that I'm not totally sure on what it looks like. So I'm not totally sure where I'm supposed to be.
Mm.
So really just kind of looking for definition and wondering, is that definition outside of me? Is it inside of me? And that's part of the process of the Roaring Fork Leadership Academy, is to help people learn how to do that self-leadership in addition to community leadership and team leadership. So I think it may or may not relate to the current space we're in the world right now versus the folks who are in that program.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a challenge for all of us. You know, I know Erica's not a trained social impact expert. She's, you know, she does branding and graphic design and tech and artistry. And so again, that just speaks to the resilience of a human being, that when you're called to do something, you will acquire the skills, you'll become the leader yourself. You're the person you've been waiting for. While we just have a few minutes left together, but one of the things I'm really interested to learn, you know, just because this is a smart group of people that is observing the world, is, are there any social impact? This can be really broad. It could be a program, it could be a movement, it could be an individual. It could, you know, is there something that you've seen that you think was really well done, particularly in the last year? A group of people, an individual, a piece of legislation, but just something working in that realm that you're like, wow, they nailed that. They executed well, they organized well, they communicated their mission or vision well. Does anything come to mind for anyone? Which is great if they don't, because then it means Eric and I are in for a job for a while, because we'll keep trying.
Well, I do think, and I'll step forward then step back because I can take up a lot of space in these conversations.
No, you're wonderful. Thank you.
In my world. I do think 350.org has done a fantastic job in their work because they recognize the power of organizing. And they recognizing the power really resides within the voices of people. Now, I'm not sure how well they listen or don't listen to their constituents. However, my experience of their communication is I'm welcomed in. I feel like I can find a way to be part of this group in a way that works for me, rather than this is how we do it. You're either on board or not on board. And that's a very, very 1990s way of doing things.
As a 90s girl, I appreciate that too.
Well, if you're on board, it's great. But
Yeah.
it's like,
No,
it's one
yeah.
of those things like, if you want to be on board and you're like, I really want to be on board, but I just feel excluded,
Mm-hmm.
then that's hard. Because then you're like, wait, where am I? I'm done. I'm not going to do anything about it.
You know, and the reason I asked the question is because I think that as a group of people, and potentially some, you know, if there are people who might watch this after the fact that want to make a difference, you know, I love case studies and holding up really good examples and why they're impactful, why they work. You know, for me, I'll share, I'm a mom, my daughter is 15, she's a freshman at Aspen High School. And you know, this was a couple of years ago, but the Parkland shooting survivors, when those high schoolers were just like, we're done waiting on adults to step up and advocate for us and take care of us. We'll just do our own thing. And they organized, and they did it so, in my opinion, you know, very methodical, very intelligently. They did their research. They learned about legislation. They're like, we might not be able to vote, but we do have a lens on us right now where we can talk about legislation. We can identify who our representatives are, and we will be voting in short time, you know, some of them within a few months. I thought that was a really great effort. And again, it gets back to the empathetic aspect, you know, that you were referencing, Andrea, which is that's their lived experience. They survived that. They dealt with it firsthand. They're the best people to advocate for it. And I know for my daughter, who's a few years younger than those kids, that was such an example to see too, of empowerment, of saying, I'm not going to be victimized. I'm not waiting on someone to make a decision on my behalf. I have my own interest, and I'm going to educate myself and voice it and do it in this very methodical way. And they're still very active. I loved that. It buoyed me. Anything coming up for you, Erica? Any movement or people speaking out?
I'm never like that great off the cuff when it comes to this stuff, but I was thinking about how something that popped in my mind was with the Elijah McClain murder. When we called, the people that we would call in that case were the Aurora City Council members, and that was like part of our scripted outreach. And one of the city council members had an outgoing message on their phone saying, like, keep the calls coming. We hear you. It's working. It doesn't matter if you live in Colorado. It's helping. Please keep calling. And it was so affirming, you know, that we were doing the right thing. And it made me think that in the case of Elijah McClain, or in the case of Breonna Taylor, probably in particular, I would say, it was the volume at which the organizers were conveying their message to the nation that actually got, you know, let's say, maybe not the justice that people were asking for all the way, but it on a more, without it being policy related or punishment related, we're talking about it now. We have this new vocabulary, we're having these conversations, and that might be more valuable to systemic shift than putting those officers in jail. You know, I mean, I don't want to, if that's up to the family to decide, that's not my place, but like, you know, I think that this year I've seen the, you know, like, just regular people like me, like whoever, like any of us here on this call, putting some work in. And it's like, if we're all doing this, it actually has an impact, and it feels really good. I don't think I can name a specific organization, but I still feel that I'm witnessing it across the country right now. And it feels really good. And sometimes it feels really frustrating, but I try to keep an eye on the wins. So yeah.
And Erica, I just did a bunch of research. I'm in my master's program right now, but it's really interesting watching that trend shift from like government leading policy, right, to the grassroots organizations, that civic, right, feeling like a community problem solver and getting involved on that, you know, grassroots individual level. And I think I feel like that, I'm predicting, and again, I'm reading other things that are predicting very similar, but I'm seeing it here in the Roaringford Valley, even with the civic, like RFL in the history of when we started doing civic projects, I think has done close to 70 different projects. And talk about case studies, just let's gather, right? Like I think about, like we have some, you know, we follow some of them, but even the talk about, like, I have teams that were formed 10 years ago. They still meet once a month for lunch, you know, to create those connections. So, I mean, there's a lot that can happen. And I do feel there's going to be a shift that we're not going to be so reliant on government to make policy. It's going to be coming from a whole bunch of different directions to impact change that we,
I think another trend I'm seeing is like the role of corporations, right? Because like
Finally.
what we're noticing is that if you put pressure on a corporation, they are really malleable compared to the government, you know, and they don't want people like talking badly about them in the public, and they want to come off as doing well right now, like doing good work. And then, you know, you see something like the electric vehicles, you know, and GM sort of spearheading that. And then the government's like, yeah, like we're behind that, you know, but it's like, it took the corporation to actually take the first step, you know, and I think we are going to see more of that. We have to get creative with the way we think about approaching things. And that's why it can be really helpful to, you know, spank and thank, like, but do it to like the corporations, media, you know, like reach out to whoever beyond, you know, and our city council and our senators, you know, and just keep sending the message out there, because there's a lot of ways to get in on the topic.
Erica, you said something that I want to put a pin in because it's really good, which is that notion around strategic change. I'm sorry, systemic change. And you were talking about something which made me think about, oftentimes activists can think about what they're fighting in this moment. It's a campaign, we win or lose. But when you're really talking about systemic change and making change, it's building relationships with your constituents over the long haul. And I think that's one of the things that's so important in activism, is sharing that vision of what are you after? What does the world look like when it's all said and done? If I'm able to wave my magic wand and this is done, and it's not one piece of policy, it's not one ruling from a court often, because that's not the system, that's part of the system. So I just want to kind of enunciate what you said, which is fantastic. And it's about those relationships. It's about those relationships with the constituents.
I agree. And patience, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Stacey Abrams is such a living example of that. You know, she's done a lot of things, but she literally spent a decade just, you know, behind the scenes working on an effort that wasn't one piece of legislation. It was trying to shift an entire system around how people vote. There are people working diligently to undo all of her work as we speak. But she actually, you know, she kind of laid out a new ground plan for a lot of other activists that are now following her model at the local level where they live. And, you know, Mary, I was thinking again about what you were saying, like Myanmar, you know, it's around the world, it's a different culture, different language, but the core issues that they're facing, when I heard about their coup, it's just the first thing I thought was, wow, we dodged a bullet. You know, that was almost us, you know, a few short weeks ago. And so I would say to you, when you're looking at an issue like that, is there's a lesson to be learned there, just in how we can apply it in our own culture. But also, I think one of the things where we all live in the reality of, particularly now that we live inside our little cubes of our computers, is how global we actually are. And there are people that they don't like globalism, but it's just a reality, and things are intertwined. And there is money and influence that moves in and out of countries all over the planet. And so to get back to like what Erica does, I think I have a feeling that if you did some research within about an hour of, you know, I'm there with Professor Google, I bet you could find a really direct, simple way that you could feel like you were impacting the situation in Myanmar, whether it's, you know, donating to an aid organization that's on the ground there, helping refugees or helping people, or if it's, figuring out who is our liaison with that country, because I guarantee you that they receive money from the US, and what is our relationship there, and writing a letter or an email to them and saying, you know, this is how I feel about this issue, and we have a relationship there, and this is what I think you need to do as a representative in that situation. I know that there are ways we can do it, because I'm with you. I mean, every time I see something, I want to jump on a plane, like go pick up the children or feed someone or do something. And those are really tangible ways to act, but there are ways that we can do it outside of that. And I also, just because we're nearing 1 o'clock and I want to honor our time, is invite you guys and anyone you're coaching, if you want to participate in our calls, we love having people on there. It's free. It's once a month. It's the first Wednesday from noon to 1 Mountain Time. The topic changes. It's usually very prescient to whatever is happening in the world. And also to let you know, if some of that sounds interesting, we have toolkits. You're welcome to go use them. You don't have to be on our calls with us to engage with us or to share them. If you're like, oh, this is a great little toolkit. My mom would love this. Now she knows how to contact her senator, her representative. We just invite you to be a part of our group. And Erica put the web address there in the URL. Do you have anything else to say, Erica, before we close?
I'm so happy for this conversation. Thank you guys so much.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you, Erica and Jess. I appreciate you put in the chat to get sign up for their newsletters, because then you can see kind of, they'll let you know of the upcoming topic, and you can do your research prior to the call. So that is awesome. It's like, I'm inspired. It's like, oh, we got to do this at a local level, right here in the Roaring Valley. And there's so much that can be done, right, to support like that community, just getting involved, right, on the civic level, community level. And I appreciate everything that you guys are doing with your Love in Action and Lead with Love, and appreciate Mary and Dave being here today. And just a shout out to CoVenture, who's a great partner, I know, who has been with Lead with Love, as well as Roaring for Leadership, and supporting these efforts that we do to keep, creating more and more action that just creates, call it a more resilient community. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you too. Anytime. Love to talk to you guys some more.
Sounds great. I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much.
Bye.